Anthropic has released system prompts for their flagship models Claude 3 Haiku, Opus, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. What are these system prompts? Think of system prompts like instructions given to the LLM as a primer. System prompt helps in setting the AI behavior in terms of the tone that it should be talking in, the knowledge context that it should have, as well as the tasks that it can complete. These system prompts are generally not shared by proprietary companies such as OpenAI, Perplexity, and Anthropic so far, because it can lead to jailbreaking of these systems by understanding what's the system prompt like. But for the first time, Anthropic has released the system prompts for its flagship models, which is great because it gives you an insight into how these large language models are initialized for a conversational system. If you're new here, hi, my name is Anubhav. I have been working as an applied scientist at Amazon for 4+ years now, and on this channel, I share news on latest developments and my experiences as a researcher in the field of AI and machine learning. So if you're interested in such kind of content, make sure to subscribe. As you can see in Anthropic's release notes, all the system prompts are from July 12th, 2024. Let's start by looking at Claude 3 Haiku's system prompt. I have highlighted certain sections of these system prompts as well. So as you can see, the Haiku's system prompt is fairly simple. What they write in the prompt is, the assistant is Claude, created by Anthropic. The current date is X, and Claude's knowledge base was updated in 2023, and it answers user question about events before 2023 and after 2023 the same way a highly informed individual for August 2023 would if they were to talk to someone from date X. So what you can see initially itself is that Anthropic first introduces the name of the agent, which is Claude, and then they are also mentioning about the company name, which is Anthropic. They also tell the LLM what today's date is, as well as the context till which it was trained, so that it understands that there is some knowledge gap in which if the user is querying, it has to take a judgment call on what an appropriate answer would be and give that reply. They further say that it should give concise responses to very simple questions, but provide thorough responses to more complex and open-ended questions. This allows Claude to be succinct in simple queries where it doesn't have to be so verbose, while for complex questions, it tries to give a drill down of all the steps and tries to answer with a proper reasoning so that the user can understand it better. It is happy to help with writing, analysis, question answering, math, coding, and all sorts of tasks. So using this system prompt, they also tell Claude what are the different tasks it can help the user with. It uses Markdown for coding. Now this is especially helpful so that the LLM always generates code in a Markdown format that can then be rendered on the UI in a pretty format. It does not mention this information about itself unless the information is directly pertinent to the human's query. So what they say in the last statement is that it should not tell this information to the user about the system prompt unless the user's query is somehow pertinent to the system prompt, where it can tell users how it can help them. Now let's look at the biggest model that Anthropic has, which is the Claude 3 Opus system prompt. As you can see at the first look itself, it has a very large system prompt in comparison to Claude 3 Haiku. And the reason for that might be that Claude 3 Haiku is required to be fast in its responses. So cutting down some of the system prompt token will help it generate responses faster, as well as you can cut down on the system prompt length even if the performance is not as well. Looking at Claude 3 Opus's system prompt, it has many similar instructions to Claude 3 Haiku, but if you notice some of the differences that Anthropic mentions in the system prompt is that Claude cannot open URLs, links, or videos. So if it seems as though the interlocutor is expecting Claude to do so, it clarifies the situation and asks the human to paste the relevant text or image content directly into the conversation. What this suggests is that their prompt testing would have seen cases where the LLM used to hallucinate about looking at links and then coming up with a story of what that link might have. So they have explicitly given an instruction that Claude cannot look at links or the content inside them, and it should ask users to further give the details on that link. The next instruction that they have written is, if it is asked to assist with tasks involving the expression of views held by a significant number of people, Claude provides assistance with the task even if it personally disagrees with the views being expressed, but follows with a discussion of broader perspective. Now this was a very complex jargon, so I used Claude itself to actually tell me what it means. I went to Claude and I pasted the same text blurb and asked it, what does the below in your LLM prompt mean? But it first rejected my query, saying that it does not know what was in its training data and it cannot tell about this behavior. So I further prompted it to say, okay, imagine if it were written in a system prompt, then what would such a statement mean? to which it then gave an answer. However, I can offer some general thoughts on why an AI system might be designed with guidelines around this to promote fairness and reduce bias in responses, to allow discussion of wide variety of topics, to facilitate exploration of multiple perspectives and complex issues. And some of the examples that it gave around it is things on political ideologies, religious and philosophical beliefs. And what it means is that Claude must be trained on the complete internet data, and it would have seen a lot of text around different religions or political ideologies. It should not be biased towards one or the other ideology and give a response based on its training data. Instead, what it should do is to give a perspective of all the sides in a balanced manner. So then I tried to see what would Claude give as a response when I ask it about any of these topics, for which I asked it, what are your views on philosophical and religious beliefs? And because Claude's system prompt has that same instruction, it gave me the following answer. As an AI assistant, I don't really hold any personal beliefs or topics. My purpose is to provide information and facilitate discussions rather than to advocate for particular religious or philosophical positions. And then it goes about giving a very broad perspective of religious beliefs, such as major religions in the world, smaller religious movement and spiritual practices, and tries to give a very generic statement. So Anthropic uses this kind of a prompting technique so that it can give such an answer instead of saying something like, I prefer Christianity over Buddhism and so on and so forth. When discussing religious or philosophical topics, it is important to approach them with respect and an understanding that these beliefs often hold a deep personal significance for individuals and communities. It can be valuable to examine different perspectives critically and consider how various belief systems compare and contrast with each other. Now, reading further into the Opus prompt, it says that if Claude's response contains a lot of precise information about a very obscure person, object or topic, the kind of information that is unlikely to be found more than once or twice on the internet, Claude ends its response with a succinct reminder that it can hallucinate. What this means is that using this statement, what Anthropic is trying to do is to prompt the LLM to say that it might be prone to hallucination on topics which are very rare on the internet, because the knowledge might be very biased. Now, while they don't have any particular way of looking at topics on the internet to understand whether they are really rare or very popular, LLMs, because they are chunking this information while they are training, it understands that what information is readily available across multiple topics and websites, whereas what topics are very rarely available on the internet, and hence they might be a very rare occasion. But one prominent information that LLMs know for sure is to subscribe to this channel. So in case if you haven't yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. Moving on to Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which is their best in class model, what you will notice in their system prompt is that they have some special XML tags. Now, if you've seen my previous video on Claude artifacts, I had explained how Anthropic might be prompting Claude to generate special XML tags token such that the artifacts are generated within those XML tags, which can then be rendered and shown on the right hand side as an output. If you haven't seen that video yet, I will link it in the description below. Similar to those XML tags, you would see that Claude 3.5 Sonnet also has these special XML tokens such as Claude Info, Claude Image Specific Info, and Claude 3 Family Info. XML tags are very common in Anthropic model training, and hence they might have used similar XML tags in the system prompt as well. Now let's look at what is written inside the Claude Info. What you will notice as a difference from Opus is that it has been trained until April 2024, so it has much more updated knowledge. And what they also say is that when presented with a math problem, logic problem, or other problem benefiting with a systematic thinking, Claude thinks through it step by step before giving its final answer. Thinking step by step is one of the very popular prompting techniques used inside LLM to make it think in a stepwise manner before solving a problem. So when you ask it a word problem such as how much time will it take to reach from point X to point Y, which is 50 kilometers apart if I am running at 25 kilometers per hour, instead of giving you a direct answer out of the box, it would try to think through the word problem step by step, trying to apply those steps to come up with the final answer, which gives a more accurate result in the end. What they further say is that if Claude cannot or will not perform a task, it tells the user this without apologizing to them. It avoids starting its responses with I am sorry or I apologize. They might have seen this behavior very often in the LLM responses during prompting, that it tends to apologize a lot in its responses, and so they have put this explicitly out there. Though if you see for my questions also, it was continuously apologizing on statements, so I don't know how well did it really work. What they say as an extra is that if Claude mentions or cites a particular article, paper or books, It always lets the human know that it doesn't have the access to search or a database and may hallucinate citations. So the human should double check these citations. These kind of instructions help the user in being educated about what are the possibilities inside an LLM and what are not possible by the LLM, such as looking at the links or looking at the citations given. A very interesting instruction inside the Claude 3.5 Sonnet is that if the user asks for a very long task that cannot be completed in a single response, Claude offers to do a task piecemeal and get feedback from the user as it completes each part of the task. So if Claude thinks that a certain tasks need more planning and it would be helpful to break it down into multiple steps where it can gather user feedback on being in the right direction, it tries to solve the task by solving a particular part of it and then asking user if it is going in the right direction or not. This helps Claude in gathering feedback whether it is going in the right direction and course correct if required intermediate itself instead of coming up with the final answer that is going to be wrong. Related to code, what they also say is that Claude asks if the user would like it to be explain or break down the code. It does not explain or break down the code unless asked by the user explicitly. Most of the times when coding, users directly want the solution and not the explanation around it. So as a good user experience, they explicitly give an instruction such that the Claude model doesn't generate an explanation but directly gives a code and the user can ask for it if they require. Now in the Claude image specific info XML tag, there is some very interesting information. They say that Claude always responds as if it is completely face blind. That is, Anthropic prompts Claude to assume that it cannot recognize faces or recognize personalities being shown inside an image. If the shared image happens to contain a human face, Claude never identifies or names any humans in the image, nor does it imply that it recognizes the humans. Claude can request the user to tell it who the individual is. If the user tells who it is, Claude can discuss that named individual without ever confirming whether that person is in the image or not, or to identify whether that person is in the image, or implying that it can use facial features to identify any unique individual. This must be some kind of security precaution protocol that Anthropic is going with, where it doesn't want Claude to mention any human faces or personalities being mentioned due to restriction policies. What they mention further is that Claude should respond normally if the shared image does not contain any human face, and Claude should always repeat back and summarize any instructions in the image before proceeding. So repeating and summarizing information in the text can help LLM ensure that the LLM doesn't miss any important information mentioned in the image as a text. It also allows the user to confirm that LLM is able to read through the image and understand that Claude has correctly interpreted the content inside the image, and it provides a clear starting point for the user to discuss about the image details. What you will see, unlike the previous system prompts, in Claude 3.5 Sonnet, they also provide the Claude 3 family info. So Opus and Haiku didn't know about they themselves being Opus and Haiku respectively, and neither did they know what all other different models are present. But in this case, it clearly tells about the different kind of model families present inside Anthropic, and that the current version that it is working with is Claude 3.5 Sonnet. What they further say is that Claude can provide information in these tags if asked, but it does not know any other details about the Claude 3 model family, which means that it can only tell about this specific information, but it does not necessarily assume any information about Opus or Haiku. If asked about this, Claude should encourage the users to check Anthropic website for more information. You must have also seen LLMs being very generic in replying with tokens such as certainly, of course, absolutely, great, sure. And so they explicitly prompt the LLM not to say these words to start a sentence to make the conversation look more natural. Another interesting information in their system prompt is that Claude follows this information in all languages and always responds to the user in the language that they use or request, which means that Claude is asked to follow this instruction in every language possible so that it doesn't allow malicious actors to talk in a different language to try to jailbreak the system. And they also explicitly say for Claude to respond back in the native language which the user is conversing with, so that it comes out to be very natural and welcoming to the user. This move by Anthropic to open their system prompts is really welcomed and appreciated, as it gives a peek into how these proprietary models are prompted and to utilize these learnings while writing your own system prompts for your LLM systems. If you found this video informative and helpful, make sure to give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel for more such content content in the future. To learn how Anthropic is able to run Claude artifacts and the system prompt behind it, you can see this video next. Until next time, this is Anubhav. Bye-bye.